All right. So the poem is a satire. It is also a mock heroic poem, just like Absalom and Ahithophel. It has the same stanza structures, like Absalom and Ahithophel. In the sense that it is written in iambic pentameter. Its major devices are allusion, devices are allusion. You have classical allusion, historical allusion, and biblical allusion as the prominent forms of allusion in MacFlecknoe. For instance, you have classical allusion where you have the lines, "This Flecknoe found, who like Augustus young." So that is an allusion to Octavian Caesar. That's an allusion to Octavian Caesar, who became the first Roman emperor at the age of 32. That's in 31 BC. The poem itself alludes to the English history during the Restoration period. The poem itself alludes to the English history during the Restoration period, especially the politics of succession. Really, the politics of succession between the Catholics and the Protestants, between the parliamentarians and the crown, the King Charles. Except that Dryden is creatively bringing the same idea to bear in their literary quarrel with Shadwell, Thomas Shadwell. Biblical allusion is seen in how Richard Flecknoe plays the role of priest and prophet in the poem. And how it alludes to how Elijah handed over the prophetic mantle to Elisha. But as I said earlier, this is presented using the device of inversion, inversion, inversion. Because what happens is an inversion of what actually happened in the Bible. Now that biblical allusion is seen in how Shadwell is likened to John the Baptist, or Shadwell is likened to Jesus Christ, and Flecknoe is likened to John the Baptist, who prepared the way for Christ. There are some interesting portions in this poem that I need to pay attention to, especially the part that relates to Ben Jonson. I think Ben Jonson is mentioned twice in the poem. On the second page, the first line of the second page, nor greater Johnson days in socks appear. That means this kind of coronation, the coronation that's being done, good writers, great writers like Ben Jonson are not allowed, will not go there, will not attend the coronation. All right? And it is ironic because Shadwell has always seen himself as a successor of Ben Jonson in the writing of Comedy of Humors. But in writing this poem, Dryden shows his attitude towards that claim by Shadwell, that he is not fit to see himself as a successor of Ben Jonson. That's why in his being crowned as the King of Dullness, Johnson cannot be allowed to attend such a function because it's not good for great writers. It's not fitting for great writers like Johnson to be there. That's the first instance that I noticed the mention of Johnson. That Johnson there refers to Ben Jonson. And then you also have when Flecknoe himself is speaking. When Flecknoe himself is speaking on page 3, trying to compare his son's qualities, all right, with that of Johnson. And in terms of how they're completely different, opposite each other, all right? Flecknoe is here saying that the son is nothing like Ben Jonson. That Shadwell is nothing like Ben Jonson. And it's ironic in the sense that Shadwell has always seen himself as, being on the same pedestal with Johnson. All right? But so transfused as oil on waters flow. You see that analogy. All right? The relationship between Johnson and Shadwell is like the relationship between water and oil. They can never mix. All right? So if you are comparing, you can see these are two different elements. He is always floats above, then sinks below. All right? So you could see that comparison between Johnson and Shadwell. So you can see the contrast between Johnson and Shadwell is illustrated in this portion. And I'm also impressed with this expression towards the end of the poem. And torture one poor word 10,000 ways. That speaks to the lack of creativity in the use of language that Dryden is trying to attribute to Shadwell through Flecknoe. All right? So in this poem, Dryden is maliciously trying to attribute all of Flecknoe's attributes as a writer, okay, to Shadwell, to make him, to cast him in a depreciating light. So to use one word, to repeat language, is one of the greatest faults of a writer. To repeat a word again and again to repeat a word without creativity, all right, is one of the greatest faults of writers. And that's why it says, and torture one poor word 10,000 ways. And in that expression, you might have what we might call personification because of the use of poor to describe the word. All right? So in this poem, Flecknoe plays the triple role of king, priest, and poet. In this poem, Flecknoe plays the triple role of priest, king, and poet. He hails his successor. He hails his successor that praises him, especially about what makes him perfect for the throne. This is about what makes him perfect for the throne. After this, he anoints him as his successor, and the crown is placed on him. And then there are prophetic words. There are prophetic words about how successful his reign will be, how glorious his reign will be. There are prophetic words that foretells the glorious reign of Shadwell. And then towards the end, a trap that has been prepared for the king makes him to sing, and while singing, he leaves the mantle of dullness for the sun. The coronation of MacFlecknoe takes place in the city. Coronation of MacFlecknoe takes place in the city, where the city center, where the citizens of the realm of dullness have gathered to applaud the new king. Where the citizens of dullness have gathered to applaud the new king. And we are told that these citizens of dullness can only admire what is dull, cannot admire creativity. Another thing I need you to notice, part of the satiric devices in this poem, or one of the satiric devices in the poem, is how the author draws attention to the victim's bodily structure, using that to infer the character of dullness associated with him, which is a device of lampoon or caricature. Okay? Which is a device of lampoon or caricature. Even while we were reading, I noted it on page 3. It's on page 3, where Dryden is satirizing Shadwell's bodily structure and stature. He says towards the end of the first row, he says, and in all changes that where bends thy will, nor let thy mountain belly make pretense of likeness, thine is a tympany of sense. A ton of man in thy large bulk is writ. Be sure thou art but a kildecan of wit. So Shadwell had this huge body, and he is satirizing that to make sure to let us have the sense that we can infer lack of sense with that bodily structure, which is an instance of lampoon in the poem. And remember that lampoon is a satiric device that draws attention to the body part of an individual to infer a character flaw or a flaw in the quality of the individual. Okay? So, we also have that in goodly fabric. We also have that in goodly fabric, which refers to Shadwell's corpulent body. So this was an all-out attack. And in today's world, we said this is body shaming, right? We call it body shaming. So goodly fabric is found on the first page, first row, towards the end of the line. Towards the end of the line. Besides, this goodly fabric fills the eye. Okay, drawing attention to Shadwell's body. Then we have the words Haywood and Shelley. Haywood and Shelley. Following that, in the copy I have underlined all these things so they will guide us. And they refer to Thomas Haywood and James Shelley, who were playwrights popular before the closing of the theaters in 1642, but they are now out of fashion. So the kind of poets that should be associated with Shadwell are poets that are no longer read. All right? Old-fashioned poets who are no longer being read. Okay? So they are seen as forerunners to Shadwell in the poem. Now, the thing about literature, old literature like this is that the contemporary readers would understand the text better because they knew some of the figures being used to talk about the subject of the poem. But we are far removed from them, and we need to really study to have the real sense that the author intended. And then a word like William means family. A word like William means family. Where you have towards the last three lines of the first page, first row, means family. Then where you have drugget is a coarse woolen cloth. So William means family. MacFlecknoe boasted of the patronage of the Portuguese king. So that is how you're supposed to understand my wobbling lute, the lute I, William Strong, went to King John of Portugal I sung, was but the prelude to that glorious day. Okay? So we're trying to look at the historical allusion in the poem, some of the words that allude to history, and some of the words that need interpretation. Then you have Epson. If you get to the next row, that first page, you find the word Epson. All right? It's a reference to Shadwell's comedy, Epsom Wells, and to the farcical scene in his Virtuoso. So Epsom Wells and Virtuoso are works of Shadwell's that are being satirized in this poem. And then you have Arion, a legendary Greek poet saved by a dolphin at sea while he was robbed and thrown overboard. Methinks I see the new Arion sail. That's why you have it in that line. And then you have toast. In the context of this poem, the toast means sewage. Sewage. As at the morning toast that floats along. So you deploy such diction to show that Shadwell's works are disgusting, okay, or anything that is associated with him are disgusting. So you have Saint Andre. a French dancer who designed the choreography of Shadwell's opera Psyche, published in 1675. Then we have Singleton. We have Singleton. So you must have read that. It's still on first page, second row. Singleton refers to John Singleton, died in 1686, a musician at the Royal Theatre. Okay, so these are far-fetched allusions to real personalities that actually lived at the time. Then you have Valerius, a character in Sir William Davenant's Siege of Rhodes. That's the first English opera. Then nursery is the name of a training school for young actors. In this poem, Augusta refers to London. In the poem, Augusta refers to London. Close to the walls which fair Augusta bind, the fair Augusta much to fears inclined. The ancient fabric raised to inform the sight, they stood of yore and Barbican its site. The watchtower once, but now so fate ordains. Okay? So Augusta refers to London. Then fabric, in that context, is wall. Punks refers to prostitutes. Maximin refers to the cruel emperor in Dryden's Tyrannic Love, published in 1669, noted for using bombastic expressions as difficult words. Then we have Great Fletcher, refers to John Fletcher, a great playwright. Buskin and socks were symbols of tragedy during the time. So if you come across buskin and socks, all right? Punks, we have punks there. Where infant punks their tender voices try, and little Maximins the gods defy. Great Fletcher never treads in buskin here, right? And then we have Simkin, a popular character in low farces. Simkin. You have it in the second line, the second page. Simkin, a popular character in low farces. That's like a generic name, which many writers used when they were writing their farces. Of course, a farce is a humorous play that uses exaggeration for both character and action, so that at the end of the day, the play is unbelievable. The actions are unbelievable. And pure clinches, when the context of the poem means puns, P-U-N-S, because you come across it. Then Panton means a well-known porn star. Then you have Thomas Dekker. Thomas Dekker, the playwright, whom Johnson satirized in the Poetester. Thomas Dekker, the playwright, whom Johnson satirized in the Poetester, the work called the Poetester. Then you have humorists, hypocrites, and psyche. Humorist, hypocrite, and psyche. These are the three plays of Shadwell. Hypocrite was a failure, was not published, was never published. And then we have Raymond and Bruce as characters in The Humorist. Raymond is a character in The Humorist, and Bruce, the character in The Virtuoso, respectively. Bum. We read that place where we have bum, B-U-M. Within the context of the poem, the bum then means unsold books. Eventually, unsold books that eventually went to the baker's shop and privies. So these are mostly books of authors that attended Shadwell's coronation. All right? Unsold books. And probably they are unsold because they were not good. Then you have John Ogilvy. It's also mentioned in the poem, a translator of Homer and Virgil, ridiculed by both Dryden and Pope as a bad poet. John Ogilvy. Then we have Berg Stationers. Bulk stationers means cheated publishers who acted as yeomen of the guard, led by Henry Herringman, who until 1679 was the publisher of both Shadwell and Dryden. Then you have Ascanius, also known as Lulus, son of Aries. Virgil refers to him as the Rome's other hope, the hope of Rome. As Troy fell, Ascanius was marked as favored by the gods when a flickering flame played around his head. Still on the issue of choosing a successor and the signs thereto. So you have Hannibal, another word that points us to classical allusion in the poem. He almost conquered Rome in 216 BC during the Second Punic War. He took his oath at age 9, Hannibal. And then we have sinister hand, that's the left hand. During a coronation, a British monarch holds two symbols of kingship. A globe, that's ball, representing the world on his left hand, a scepter in his right hand. So in lines 121 to 127, Shadwell symbols of monarchy. Shadwell symbols of monarchy are a mark of L, A-L-E, that's alcohol. All right? Then Flecknoe's dreary play, Love's Kingdom. All right? It's mentioned there. That means by Dryden standard, the play is boring. Love's Kingdom is a boring play. So on one hand, he holds a cup of alcohol, and the other hand, he holds Dryden's boring play as symbols of monarchy. Then a crown of poppies, which suggests heaviness, dullness, and drowsiness. The poppies also referred obliquely to Shadwell's addiction to opium. And maybe he knew that Shadwell used to take drugs, opium. All right, so he uses the poppies to represent. So he just attacks everything about Shadwell: his character, his books, his stature, his physical appearance, and everything. He didn't leave anything untouched. All right, he went all out. Okay, and Gentle George refers to Sir George Etheredge, a writer of brilliant comedies. Then we have Sir Charles Sedley, poet-writer who wrote the prologue of Epsom Wells. Then Lad with Wit, a sentence in Burton's Anatomy of Melancholy. The lad that lean books with fat of others' works. That's plagiarism, right? Yeah. Which also accuses Shadwell of that he fills his books with ideas from other authors and has no original ideas of his own. Then we have Sir Formal Trefoil, the ridiculous and vapid orator in Virtuoso. And then the mention of dedications refers to Shadwell's act of frequently dedicating his works to the Duke of Newcastle and members of his family. Prince Nicander is found in Shadwell's work Psyche. To sell bargain is to answer an innocent question with a coarse or indecent phrase like the expression whip stitch, often used by Sir Samuel Ahati in Virtuoso. Bias, B-I-A-S, alludes to the bowling game. Bias is the spin given to the bow that causes it to swerve. Dryden closely parodies a passage in Shadwell's epilogue to the humorist. Then tympany, a swelling in some part of the body caused by wind. Tun, tun, a large wine cask. Right? Then Irish pen. MacFlecknoe was Irish. MacFlecknoe was Irish, where Ireland suggests poverty, superstition, and barbarity to 17th century Londoners. Keen iambics, sharp satire. Keen iambics refers to sharp satire. Leave writing plays and choose for thy command some peaceful province in acrostic land. There thou mayst wings display and altars rage, and torture one poor word 1,000 ways. A critique of Shadwell saying that he does not know how to write plays, but he should write simple poetry, probably for the delight of children. So this was very biting, right? And I noticed somewhere in the poem where Shadwell says that, where Dryden says that Shadwell's satire do not bite, and I noted that there is a failed art. That means the art does not live up to what is expected of it, because satires are supposed to bite. But where the satire does not bite, then it is a failure. All right? Then you have Bruce and Longview. In the virtuoso, Bruce and Longview played a trick on Sir Formal Trevor while he makes a speech. Then you have Sinking, he left his drugged robe behind, borne upwards by a subterranean wind. The mantle fell to the young prophet's part, with double portion of his father's heart. Brings the poem to a dramatic end in ways that make us think of the coronation, the act in the Bible where Elisha is anointed to take over from Elijah. And I think this is recorded in the Bible in 2 Kings chapter 2, verse 8 to 14. And it also confirms our earlier assertion that biblical allusion is an important aspect of the poem. So that will be our lesson for today. When we meet again, we'll take The Rape of the Lock by Alexander Pope. Morning.